My family cut me out of their lives over a lie my cousin spread. Now, 7 years later, they want me back after my grandparents made me the biggest shareholder in our family business. I'm 30. 7 years ago, I was just a 23-year-old guy, working in my family's real estate business, believing I'd one day take the reins. Our family was tight-knit, always looking out for one another, or so I thought. I grew up with this sense of loyalty, this understanding that family would always have my back. But little did I know, I was the only one who actually believed it. The family business wasn't just a job to me. It was something I'd been involved with since I was a teenager, spending weekends and school vacations in the office, helping my grandparents organize files, and taking notes at meetings I could barely understand back then. My grandparents built the business from the ground up. My grandfather was the founder, my father joined him, and eventually brought the rest of us into the fold. It was assumed that I'd follow in their footsteps. That is, until my cousin B decided that what was mine should be his. B and I were close once. He was the golden boy, a charmer who got away with everything, and I looked up to him. I thought he was my friend, but looking back, I was just someone he used when it was convenient. B didn't want to work his way up the way I did. He wanted the power and respect that came with running the family business, but without any of the effort. He was used to getting things handed to him, and I guess he figured this would be no different. It all started during a family meeting. My grandparents were thinking about the future of the business and discussing who would take over. I knew they trusted me. I had earned that trust. But I had no idea that B was ready to stab me in the back just to get his way. B waited until we were all sitting around the table. My parents were there, my grandparents, and a few aunts and uncles. Then he spoke up, casually at first, saying there was something he needed to bring to everyone's attention. Before we talk about leadership, he started, giving me a look. I think we need to address a serious issue. I had no idea what he was about to say, but the tone in his voice made my stomach sink. Then he dropped it. I'm sorry to bring this up, but I think M has been siphoning money from the business. It was like being hit by a truck. B had a whole story prepared, with details that sounded so convincing. He claimed he'd seen invoices and transactions that were suspicious, and he painted a picture of me as this greedy, self-serving traitor. He even had doctored printouts that he called proof. I was too stunned to speak at first, which probably made me look guilty to everyone in the room. I tried to explain, to say it wasn't true, but the family was already hooked by his performance. B wasn't just accusing me, he was practically begging them to see me for who I really was. I could see my mother's face crumple, my father's jaw tighten. My grandparents just looked at me with a silence that spoke volumes. They didn't say a word, but their lack of defense made it clear they believed him. I spent the next few days frantically digging through records, trying to find something that would clear my name. But B had thought ahead. He'd mixed his story so intricately into the daily operations that proving my innocence without a months-long audit was impossible. And the family wasn't about to let that happen. They wanted this to be over, wanted me gone. I guess it was easier for them to believe the lie than to face the truth about B. My father called me into his office a few days later. He didn't even look at me as he spoke. We can't trust you anymore, he said, his voice cold and final. With that, he showed me the door. The family closed ranks, and I was out. No phone calls, no visits, no explanations to anyone outside the family. I moved to another city and started from scratch, working odd jobs just to get by. I told myself that I'd eventually move on, but the pain never really went away. They had believed B's lies without question, cut me out like I was nothing. And after everything I'd done for them, that hurt more than anything. 7 years passed. 7 years of silence. I made a life for myself, though it was never the life I'd imagined. Then one day, I got a call from a lawyer. Apparently, my grandparents had left me their majority shares in the business, making me the largest shareholder. At first, I thought it was some kind of sick joke. Why would they do that after all this time? But as the lawyer explained, it became clear. My grandparents, in their old age, had finally seen B for who he really was. They'd left me the shares, not as an apology, but as a safeguard. They knew B would ruin the business if he got control, and they knew I was the only one who could stand in his way. I wasn't sure if I wanted the responsibility, but I also couldn't ignore the opportunity. I decided to go back, to see for myself what had become of the family I'd once loved. When I arrived, the tension was immediate. My parents looked shocked to see me, my father's face a mix of anger and something else, maybe shame. B was furious. He tried to play it cool, acting like he was happy to see me, but the hostility was clear. "You're back," he said, forcing a smile. "I guess you're here to hand those shares over to someone who actually knows what to do with them." I laughed, not out of humor but out of disbelief. "Oh, you mean you?" B's smile faltered, and for a moment I saw the real him, the entitled brat who thought the world owed him everything. "The business should stay with someone who understands it," he said, his voice tight. "You haven't been here for years. You don't know how things work anymore." I looked around the room, seeing the others for the first time in years. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes, and my father just looked uncomfortable. They were all waiting to see what I would do, as if I'd come back just to hand everything over and disappear again. But I wasn't the same person I'd been 7 years ago. I wasn't about to let B or anyone else push me around. "You're right," I said, looking directly at B. "I don't know how things work here anymore. But I know one thing. I'm not going anywhere." B's face twisted with anger, and I could see him struggling to keep control. "You think you're gonna just walk back in and take over?" he hissed. "The family doesn't even want you here." "Maybe not," I said, shrugging. "But I'm still the largest shareholder, and that means I make the decisions." The weeks that followed were a nightmare. B did everything he could to sabotage me. He spread rumors among the employees, trying to make me look like an outsider who didn't belong. He even tried to frame me for financial discrepancies again. He was hoping to drag me into a legal battle that would drain me financially and emotionally. But I was ready this time. I kept records of everything, documented every interaction, and made sure I had evidence to counter any accusation he threw my way. My parents tried to intervene, pleading with me to let things go for the sake of family unity. They downplayed B's actions, calling them youthful mistakes, and insisting that I should forgive and forget. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even after all this, they still couldn't see B for who he was. Or maybe they just didn't want to. "Why should I give up what I've earned?" I asked, my voice barely concealing my anger. "Why should I forgive someone who destroyed my life just to get ahead?" My father sighed, looking at me with that same disappointment he'd had 7 years ago. "Family is more important than money," he said, as if that was supposed to make everything okay. I laughed, bitter and angry. "Funny, I don't remember you saying that when you threw me out." The tension only escalated from there. B was losing his grip, and he knew it. One night, after a particularly heated meeting, he cornered me in the parking lot. His face was twisted with rage, and I could see he was barely holding it together. "You think you've won," he spat, his voice low and venomous. "But you don't deserve any of this. You're nothing, just a parasite living off the family's hard work." I looked at him, feeling a strange sense of pity. "Funny," I said, "I was thinking the same thing about you." B snapped. He lunged at me, fists swinging, but I was ready. I dodged, and he stumbled, nearly falling to the ground. I didn't hit him back. I didn't need to. The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. He was done. The next day I called a family meeting. I laid everything out, the lies, the sabotage, the manipulations. B tried to interrupt, tried to defend himself, but no one was listening. For the first time, everyone saw him for who he really was. The charming facade he'd worn for years was shattered, and the family was left to confront the truth. B, realizing he'd lost his hold, began to panic. But it was too late. No one was willing to turn a blind eye anymore. B tried desperately to salvage his image, turning to distant relatives and family friends, pleading for support. He even played the victim card, claiming I was destroying the family, but the stories had worn thin. His entitlement and manipulations were plain for all to see, and his cries fell on deaf ears. Everyone was exhausted by his schemes, his lies, his need to dominate. His supporters had dwindled to none. Our final confrontation was, in a way, both pathetic and satisfying. B had nowhere left to turn, no allies left to manipulate. He tried one last act of arrogance, a final, empty attempt to intimidate me. This isn't over, you know. I'll find a way to take back what's mine. I looked at him, calm and resolved. You had everything handed to you and you ruined it. This was never yours. You just thought you were owed something you never earned. That was the last straw. With nothing else to say, B stormed out, defeated and humiliated. In the weeks that followed, I reshaped the family business with a new sense of purpose. I promoted people who were committed and loyal, the ones who had quietly carried the company on their shoulders without demanding recognition. I set policies to ensure no one could manipulate the system the way B had. The business was built around hard work and trust again, values my grandparents had once instilled but which B had nearly destroyed. As for B, I offered him a severance package and a way to exit quietly. He had no choice but to accept. He left with what dignity he had left, but he was no longer the golden boy, no longer the charmer everyone fawned over. He had burned every bridge, alienated every ally, and was left with only his pride, and not much of that either. My parents, meanwhile, struggled to come to terms with everything that had happened. My father and I had a final, tense conversation. He looked at me, for the first time acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, he had been wrong. I never thought it would come to this, he admitted, a look of something close to regret in his eyes. Neither did I replied, letting a long silence fall between us. But I guess it had to. There was no grand reconciliation, no tearful apologies. My parents and I would probably never have the close relationship we once did, but in the end, I didn't need their validation anymore. I had found my purpose, my path, and I had reclaimed what was mine. In the aftermath, I found a new family among the people who stood by me through the worst of it, the ones who valued me not because of a last name, but because of the work I put in. The family business was finally just that. A business. And it was run on integrity, not entitlement. So, there it is. 7 years of betrayal, lies, and finally redemption. If you've read this far, thank you for sticking with me. And if you're into more stories of family drama, betrayal, or maybe just a little dose of karmic justice, hit that subscribe button. After all, you never know what kind of stories are waiting around the corner.